Hello and welcome to today's episode in the Get Unstuck series. I am Sarah Archer, and if you haven't met me before, I'm a career and leadership coach, and I work with female leaders to create the kind of career success that works for them without feeling they've got to either sell out or burn out. And I created the Get Unstuck series to help you move forward in your career if you're feeling a bit stuck in some way. So I cover a huge array of different topics that will help you just think about your career differently, give you inspiration, motivation, and always kind of practical tips and techniques to take away with you. And I try and keep them fairly short, so around 15 minutes every Wednesday. Normally at 12:15. We're on slightly later today at 1 o'clock. Normally I'll be live at 12:15 on LinkedIn, in my Facebook group, the Love What You Do Lounge, and over on my YouTube channel, Career Tree Coaching. So if you are here with me live and you feel comfortable, do say hello. I know sometimes with the topics that I cover, you might not always want people to know that you are watching. So only feel, you can contribute if you feel comfortable. And obviously, if you do feel comfortable and you've got questions for me on the topic, then do pop them in the chat and I will answer them as we're going along or at the end. And also, if you're watching on replay, hello, and you've got a question for me, just tag me in the question and then I will know to come back and answer that question for you. So let's dive into today's topic, which is all about how to stop being a perfectionist at work. And I thought this would be a good topic to talk about because we probably don't talk about it enough. And sometimes people don't feel comfortable sharing that they are experiencing challenges with perfectionist tendencies because they don't want to appear weak or not able to cope or whatever reason. So we kind of just try and work through it ourselves. So I thought it'd be a good topic for us to talk to, because I guess over the 15 years that I've been a career and leadership coach, I have actually worked with quite a number of clients who've experienced challenges around perfectionist tendencies. And it can often go hand in hand with imposter feelings as well. It can kind of play into that as well. So definitely kind of something that we might feel we've got to tackle at some point in our careers, because it can be a bit of a double-edged sword, can't it? It can help us achieve, high standards, work to a very high level, but can, come with challenges around unnecessary anxiety and, slowing you down. So what I want to try and position today is that you can still be a high achiever without being a perfectionist. Because, the research tells us that actually if you are a perfectionist or you have perfectionist tendencies, then you're probably going to suffer from high levels of stress, anxiety. You probably experience a fear of failure, fear of making mistakes. You constantly feel you have to strive to do better. You're never kind of happy with the success that you've achieved. You probably procrastinate as well because you're a perfectionist, and you may experience lower levels of psychological well-being or feelings of happiness. So there's a lot kind of why not to stick with perfectionist tendencies. And also, they can impact people around you. So your team, your peers, also your family can be impacted by your perfectionist tendencies. So what I'm going to do today is just take you through a technique that can help with changing how you think about perfectionism for yourself. And one of the first things you can do is maybe just think about where it comes from. It can be helpful. It's not essential, but it can be helpful to kind of know maybe how long have I been feeling that I have to be a perfectionist? Is it something I've always struggled with? Is it something fairly recent? And where's it come from? So sometimes if you've had parents who are perfectionists or parents who have set very high standards for you, maybe academically, then that can trigger perfectionist tendencies. If you believe that your self-worth is tied up with your achievements, so maybe you were praised for your achievement rather than the effort you put into getting that achievement, that can create perfectionist tendencies. Or if you feel like you need to be in control because you are worried about failing and appearing vulnerable, that can also be a trigger for perfectionism as well. So it might just be useful just to reflect for a little bit about where it's come from, what might have triggered it for you. And recognizing also that a lot of people are scared that if they stop being a perfectionist, it's going to impact their performance or their reputation. And that's not going to be the case, as I'm hopefully going to show you today. And I have suffered with it in the past. So when I was in my HR career, I was a head of HR. And I just reduced my hours down to 4 days a week because I'd become a mum. And what I was finding is that I felt like I was not doing either of my jobs very well, in that I was not being able to achieve what I wanted in my head of HR role. I was having to do as much in 4 days as I was doing in 5 days, and I wasn't managing to deliver the standard that I wanted to. And then as a first-time mum, I'd obviously set myself really high standards about how I wanted to be a mum, and I was really struggling to do that and work as well, and give my little boy the kind of experience that I wanted to. And it was making me feel really anxious and a little bit depressed. So I found a really great therapist, and he introduced me to the concept of good enough. And it was just revelationary. And it's something that I've kind of carried with me from that experience. And the concept of good enough, it's not about delivering mediocre work or low quality work. It's just about recognizing that not everything that you do is worthy of 100% of your time and energy. Because as a perfectionist, you want to do everything really, really well and to a high standard. And it's recognizing actually that not everything at work is worthy of that. And I'm going to talk you through how you can approach taking that on board as a way of being. Because what we want to do is reposition it for you as rechanneling the strength that you have through experience of being a perfectionist, rather than aiming for a lower goal. So we don't want to think about it as lowering your standards, but just rechanneling your strengths. And I had a client that I worked with around this area who always pops into my mind when I think about this. So she was an architect in an architect's practice. So obviously, accuracy, detail, high standards, really important. But what she had noticed was that it was kind of creating this kind of overwhelm around perfection, and it was impacting her ability to work and do her job and deliver her projects on time. And what she was really concerned about was that at home, she was trying to get everything perfect at home as well. So she was spending her weekends tidying her house, getting the kids organized, not really doing things that she enjoyed or that gave her a chance to recharge. And so she was heading towards burnout. She could recognize this. And so we worked together around this concept of good enough. And again, for her, like me, it was kind of revelationary, and she really embraced it and put into place that kind of recognition that not everything she did at work and at home warranted those really, really high standards. It took time, but it really transformed how she approached both her work and her home life. And she took on board the way that I'm going to take you through now, this approach to help you. So it kind of broke the cycle for her, because this is a kind of pattern of thinking that we've got into, and we just need something to break that cycle and give us a new pattern to establish. So if you've got any questions so far, do pop them in the chat. I'm really happy to answer those questions for you while I take you through this 7-step approach to establishing good enough as your new mantra. So the first thing would be to identify 2 pieces of work. So we're not going to be doing everything because we want it to be sustainable. So the first step would be just to identify 2 pieces of work where you can challenge yourself to deliver good enough work. Okay, so they're probably going to be pieces of work where they're not hugely impactful. So they're going to be low impact areas, because you don't want to put the pressure on yourself where, doing good enough work on something that is high impact. So just noticing two things at work that you could do, where you can apply good enough work. And questions you can ask yourself to help with this is, am I using my time wisely, and am I being productive? Okay, because obviously within that whole task list, that to-do list that you've got, there are going to be things where, as I said, they're not going to be worthy of 100% of your time. So that's the first thing, is identifying two things on your to-do list that you want to try out good enough approach. The second thing then is to define good enough for you. Okay, so we want to be thinking about maximizing impact. So for example, if you were to spend an extra 3 hours making a presentation absolutely amazing, top drawer, really high standard, is it going to increase the impact for that client or for your organization to the same degree? Okay, so it's kind of like weighing up, is that extra 3 hours going to uplift and make a difference in terms of impact to that piece of work? The answer is probably no. It's probably going to be no. You could probably spend an hour on that presentation and still have the desired impact that you want from it. So it's kind of weighing up, how am I going to define good enough? Is it about the time factor, how much time I'm going to spend on this? Is it about the number of edits that I'm going to do? What's my cutoff point going to be where I'm just going to accept that this is good enough? And sometimes it can just be useful to use a time thing initially to say, okay, I'm going to just limit myself to spending an hour on this, and then I'm going to accept it's going to be good enough. Which, if you are a perfectionist now and you're listening to this, you're probably going to be going, oh my goodness, I can't do that. Okay, but stay tuned, because I'm going to talk you through some other things that will help you with this. So the third thing to do is to give yourself permission to experiment and to just learn from this experience, and not to worry about making a mistake, and being okay with it not being perfect, which is a big challenge. Okay, it's going to be a big challenge because you've been used for a long time to delivering perfect work. And I'm using perfect loosely because obviously everyone's definition is different, but you're used to delivering perfect work. But one thing that can help with this is using an affirmation. So we're talking about affirmations in terms of changing a pattern in your brain, because your brain has a default it will go to, which is about everything has to be perfect. And what we want to do is give it a different thought, because the brain doesn't like uncertainty, and you trying something new out is going to push your brain into uncertainty. So just giving it a different thought that can be reassuring can help you in this transition phase where you're trying out good enough. So your affirmation might be something like, see, I'm not perfect, might be something like, I'm okay with experimenting on this particular piece of work. I don't expect it to be perfect. And then you're just going to repeat that over and over again to yourself. I mean, it's obviously better for you to come up with the affirmation because it'll be more powerful for you, but it's something along those lines about giving yourself permission on this particular piece of work for it not to be perfect, and to just experiment with it. Okay, because we want to just shift this mindset a little bit from everything having to be perfect to thinking about this can be good enough. And you could bring good enough into this affirmation too. You could say, I'm going to be really comfortable experimenting with good enough on this piece of work, just to give your brain that comfort and that certainty. Okay, so then the fourth thing that can help with this is to actually kind of increase your motivation, so you can focus on the benefit this is going to give you. So if we think about the presentation example I've just talked about, instead of spending 3 hours on this presentation, you're going to maybe give yourself 1 hour to spend on creating it. And don't forget, you've got delegation, so you might be able to delegate some of the work to somebody else. So that then is going to free up 2 hours for you. So the benefit of that might mean that you can leave on time, and you can get home and spend time with your family, or you can leave on time and get to the gym because you haven't been able to do any exercise for ages, or that yoga class, or whatever it might be. So just focusing on the benefit of you experimenting with good enough. Or it might be that you'll just be able to feel less stressed because you know you're taking charge of your perfectionist tendencies. Okay, so that's our fourth step. Then our fifth step, and this is about being able to then start embedding this approach and making it sustainable, is to monitor your progress. And there's two elements to this. So the first would be to just review and notice what happens when you submit or complete a good enough piece of work. So does anybody notice? Does anybody say, that's not your usual standard? Or, what happens? Probably nothing. Probably nobody will comment on it. So just recognizing that actually it doesn't have an impact of you spending less time on something or doing less rewrites or less edits on it. So that's one element of monitoring your progress. And the second thing of that would be just to check in with yourself. What did I avoid because I was fearful of failing on it? So what did I put off this week because I was scared I was going to fail? And what did I actually take forward when I felt uncertain? So it's noticing when you're embracing good enough and when you're stuck in perfectionism, because you can start to celebrate when you are actually moving things forward without having everything perfect before you do so. And you can just maybe start to notice the things where you are still avoiding the good enough approach, or where you might be procrastinating because you're afraid of failure, and just asking yourself, well, how could I approach that differently so that I can move it forward in terms of a good enough approach? So just kind of monitoring your progress on that. Then our sixth point is to engage some support with this, because sometimes we feel just got to do it myself, do it on my own. But actually, you could look for support from your boss or peers that you trust, where you've got good relationships. And you can ask them for support in two ways. So you could maybe show them a document or something you're working on that's one of your good enough pieces of work early in the process and get their feedback. So they might say, well, yeah, that's absolutely fine. That's good enough right now. So it'll help you in your judgment around understanding what is good enough. So that's one thing you could ask them for. The other thing you could ask them for is to give you feedback, and you're going to probably ask to tell them you're giving them permission to do this. Give you feedback when you're maybe being too fussy or too finicky or too high maintenance, to help you recognize when maybe you don't need to be stressing about that high level of input. Okay, so that's two things you can think about in terms of getting support with this. And then the seventh point is recognizing that underneath these perfectionist tendencies might be some unhelpful limiting beliefs, and that actually you might want to get some professional support to unpack those limiting beliefs and get some help reframing them into more supportive beliefs. So that could be from a coach, and obviously that's the work I do with my clients, or depending on how deeply the beliefs are held and where they've come from, it might be getting some therapeutic interventions, a bit like I did when I was struggling with my job and being a mum. So just to kind of bear that in mind too, because you've probably been managing these perfectionist tendencies for a long time, so some things might feel a bit hard to shift. So hopefully that has given you some food for thought around being able to move through perfectionist tendencies. And I'm just going to quickly run through those 7 points again, just to remind you. So we've got one is identify 2 pieces of work that you can experiment with a good enough approach. The second thing is to define good enough for yourself. What does it mean for you? The third thing is to give yourself permission to experiment, permission not to be perfect, and maybe use an affirmation to help you with that. The fourth thing is to focus on the benefits of taking a good enough approach. The fifth thing is to monitor your progress and learn from it, and also celebrate when it has worked for you. The sixth thing is to engage support from your boss or peer. And the seventh is to get support professionally if you feel you need it. So I would love to know if that helps you, if you do take some action around trying out the Good Enough approach, then please message me, let me know. I'd always love to know how it's gone. You can message privately, obviously. And if you felt it was something you wanted some coaching support with, then obviously DM me and we can have a chat about that. So I will be back next week at the normal time of 12:15, and the topic next week is 3 things you can do to boost your career success. So if that is something you'd like to find out more about, please do join me next week, either on LinkedIn, on my YouTube channel, or in my Love What You Do Facebook lounge. Have a great week, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.